Hello everybody. The next couple of videos are going to be like a beginner's guide to watercolours. A lot of people are given watercolours for Christmas and things as your family know you're arty and are too afraid to use them. So I want to take you through some basic exercises that will give you the confidence to start painting with watercolours. They are nice simple exercises and there's a certain mindfulness in doing them as well. It's like colouring in but with watercolour, and it just gets you ready to start painting your own things. So the first one we're going to do is getting to know your paint box. This is my current favourite paint box. This is a little Van Gogh set. You can get them from Lawrence's. This is the 15 colour one, and it comes with its own little brush. I've also got a bigger set which came with a brush as well, and these are really good brushes. So they're little small round brushes. So these are the brushes I use. This is a synthetic one called a Proline, pretty good, got a nice point to it. This is the Van Gogh one, which is very nice, and this is a size 8 round brush. It might be a bit too big for this exercise, but I'll see how it goes. And then you want another big brush, so you want a selection pretty much like that in your kit. That will probably do you for everything. So I have another little palette here so I can mix up good colours. This comes with a pull-out palette, which is very useful, and I've got 2 jugs of water, mainly because water is your mixing medium and you want that medium to be clean. So the idea is you clean your brushes in one and then use that one to paint, but I generally forget and do them anyway. The other essential bit of equipment is kitchen towel. I like plenty kitchen towel because it does what it says on the tin. It's very absorbent. And another useful little thing to have is a sprayer. It's quite useful to spray your paints before you start. You can actually activate the colour there. So we're just going to go through the different colours here. I just want to bring up this book actually, which is fascinating. This is Victoria Finlay, Travels Through a Paint Box Colour. And it's very interesting about the history of colour, and I will be talking about little snippets I've learnt from this book as I go through them, because all these colours have their own little personality and history. They're all just chemicals, so it took a while to invent a lot of them. So here we go. So here I've got my little paint box, and I'm going to use the medium-sized brush, I think. This is the nice little Van Gogh one. And I'm going to use lemon yellow. So always start with the yellows. So I've actually labelled the colours in these little boxes that came with this set. Different sets have different colours, but it often says on the box what colours they are. So I'm just going to go through them. So always start with your yellows, because yellows are very prone to being mucky. So I've got my yellow here, my lemon yellow, and I'm going to try and make the darkest version of each colour and then dilute them with water to make a lighter version. So I'm just going to paint that there, and then I'm going to just clean my brush, wipe my brush, and then I'm just going to bring down that pigment that's already there, and I think I might add a little bit of water to see how pale I can get that wash to be. And then I'm going on to, I think this, oops, that's gone very gooey. I think this is something they called azo yellow or gamboge, which is equivalent to cadmium yellows. Cadmiums are fiendishly expensive, so and they're very good colours, but you can get cadmium hue versions, which are the same thing, but don't contain the poisonous chemical cadmium. I think most of these sets, they wouldn't contain, it does say cadmium red, hopefully it's cadmium red hue, because cadmium is related to mercury on the periodic table, and so is poisonous, as I keep telling people not to suck their brushes. So this is something called deep yellow, which will be equivalent to a deep cadmium yellow, but you can see it's almost got an orange quality to it. I'm just cleaning and drying my brush. I'm just bringing that pigment down and seeing what colours I can develop. I'm quite an impatient painter, and I like colours to be quite strong and punchy when they start, so I don't like very pale watercolours. So I like to have really good paints. Look at that one. Gosh, that's cadmium red. The cadmiums are very dense colours as a rule, And I think the cheapness of this paint box, I'm sure it can't be real cadmium, but it's an equivalent thereof. It's a chemical identical thing, or not identical, but similar. But you can see you can get nice variations of colour there. And this set hasn't got the traditional alizarin crimson, but it's got this something called deep red, which I think is trying to be red madder. Madder was a root, this is a bit of history for you, that you could dig up and mash into colour. I mean, they for a long period of history, it was very hard to find the colours that they wanted. So I'm just going in there and dragging that water through, and you can see you're getting a variation on that. I'm just going to take a little bit of that back up so you can see how pale you can get it. And this set of paints luckily has this thing called Magenta, which is a really nice colour. It actually is the same as the one in your printer, so ideally you can get all colours known to man from the primary colours that you get in your printer, but it doesn't always work out that way. And I'm just adding a bit of water, and you can see it's a really zingy colour. Oh, look, a cat hair. And then I've got French Ultramarine, one of my favourite colours, and you can see it's this beautiful, well, almost cobalt blue, which you would find in glass blowing, but in fact this is French Ultramarine. It's called French Ultramarine because in about 1800 they were fed up with training to Afghanistan to find lapis lazuli and grind it up. It was all a very difficult process. And so there was a competition announced, and the French won. Oops, I've added water to that, so that's messing it up. But you can see the difference in colours you can get. Now this is phthalo blue, which is pretty much the same as Prussian blue, but it's a new chemical recently invented, I think. And you can see how dark that gets. You can get that really, really dark. And then I'm just going to add, so I'm just cleaning my brush, dragging the water down to see what colours it can make. And don't worry about being neat at this stage, you're just enjoying the application of colour. And in this set, they do vary a bit. I think sea whites carry Van Gogh, if you want to get some. They have this lovely colour, cerulean blue. It's a very nice colour for skies. In fact, it was invented for skies, and it took its name from a Wordsworth poem, or the Greek or something romantic like that. But again, invented about 1820, I think. If you look at like Turner's paint box, you can see that they had very limited colours to work with. And if you've seen the film Mr. Turner, that his father was his colour man, and he was always running off to the colour men and finding new colours. Look, we got a new yellow in, Mr. Turner. And then Turner would use it in his paintings. So that's SAP Green, which is a nice colour. This is a very good little set, I think, because it's got good colours that you need. I often find some of the English watercolour hard pan sets, they don't have them. And I had a Sienna set once, and that had some very old colours in that I felt I didn't need at all. So I suppose each country has its different tradition. And here we have Viridian Green. This is called Viridian Green because it's based on verdigris, which is when copper oxidizes. So that's how they used to make it. I don't know how they make it now. Probably a chemical process, but it's a lovely colour. And often that is the only colour you get in a little set. And the reason why they give you this rather odd colour is because it's a very, very good mixing colour. Now we're coming to the earth colours, as they're known. So that's yellow ochre, which is this colour, which is generally in most sets of paints because it's such a useful painting colour. It's not as zingy as yellow, but it will mute down other colours very well. And yellow ochre is one of the oldest colours in the world. It's what the cavemen used to use. They used to bury their dead in it. You can dig it up out of the ground, and you can also get red ochre. And they would use it in their cave paintings and all sorts of other things, along with soot and chalk and rust. And that's burnt sienna, one of my favourites. You can see that's got a nice zingy transparency to it. And I'm just going to punch that up a bit and then drag the wash down. So you just get in the habit. So I'm just cleaning my brush. I clean my brush, I pick up my burnt umber, which is not the best colour in the world, from my very gooey paint box, and apply that into my little square, I'm just going to grab a little bit more, and then I'm going to bring the wash down. Can you see? So I just picked up pure water and brought the wash down. In fact, I might get rid of a bit of that. And then another colour, Payne's Grey, which is very nice of them to give us Payne's Grey, because that's a lovely colour. You can see it's kind of a bluish tinge to it. It's better than black, because it's not so dense. Black can be very dead. I'm just going to bring that down, and you can see you've got this nice bluish colour. I remember Keith was very against Payne's Grey, but I think that might have been a product of his education. It might have been too popular in art schools, and he just had a huge prejudice against it. But it's gorgeous. Why wouldn't you love that? While I'm here, I'm just going to put a couple of washes on here. I'm going to put just so they'll have time to dry. So I want to show you overlaying washes. So I'm just putting a little wash of French Ultramarine here, so I can show you how washes react when they're overlaid, and that's got to be dry before I overlay anything on it. Right, soften the edge a bit. And then I'm going to pick up the magenta, just because it's so lovely. Look at that, zing zing. I think this might be based on a new wave of colours called quinacridone colours. They're reds and yellows. There's a lovely colour called quinacridone gold, which was invented from car paint by Daniel Smith. I think he decided that he was fed up with the density of all the colours. So he said, I'm going to invent a new one. So what he did, he invented a whole new range of paint: quinacridone red, magenta, gold, and I think there's another one. I don't know what it's called now. But they are very zingy, as you can see, and very transparent. A lot of the other yellows and reds are very opaque, which is not what you want in a watercolour. And then I'm just going to take some Viridian and pop it in here. Oh, look, another cat hair. Oh well. We'll just live with that. So I'm just putting these on so they'll have a chance to dry. And then I'm going to go on to mixing colours. And just let that dry. You don't have to be madly neat at this stage. Oh, look what that's doing. So I just put some water in there and it's pushing back into the pigment. So it's just by playing you realise that what watercolours can do. So it's worth giving yourself permission to play. There is a good watercolourist called Haynes, and she's got some videos on YouTube, I suppose. Jackson's Art she's associated with, and she had this wonderful session of painting for the bin. So rather than thinking that, oh my gosh, I've got to do a great painting with watercolour, you want to be able to play so you can understand what it does. Right, so now I'm going to go on with the mixing of the greens and mixing general colours and some general techniques you can use. So I'm going to start with Viridian, because as I say, this is often the only green you're given. So this is Viridian, as you know, which is a lovely bluey green, and then yellow ochre, which is here, which is quite a dense colour. And I just want to say a few words about paper. To get the best out of watercolours, use watercolour paper. That is the one thing you must do, because cartridge paper is very smooth. This is actually a rough Fabriano, which is my favourite paper. It's absolutely gorgeous. I can't resist it. I have to stroke it when I'm just about to paint, and it kind of inspires me to paint. You can get Bockingford and various other ones, but you want at least 140 pounds or 300 grams, it's per square inch or something, how much it weighs, and that is the minimum you need for watercolour paper. So I'm just mixing up my yellow ochre and my Viridian there, and I'm just going to pop that on there, and you're getting this quite nice grassy green. You can vary that, of course. You can add more Viridian and you can add more yellow ochre to make it grassier. So here I'm just going to dab that little blob of water. So here we are, this is the Viridian, and painting the square, and then I'm going to use the dark brown. So there's a kind of rule of thumb about mixing greens, is use the earth colours. they will knock them back, will knock fiendish greens like this back. Sometimes you're given a fiendish colour like emerald green, which is very bright, and you want to be able to ameliorate it, because often these greens don't resemble anything in nature. So I'm just going to take the Viridian I've got going and a bit of burnt umber, and you can see it's making this very nice dark green. I always think of it as the colour of yew trees, but very good for shadows, so that works very well. And this set has actually got SAP Green, and as you can see it's quite zingy in itself, so that works very well. As you see, I'm kind of controlling the wash and the water by having this kitchen towel. I'm just dabbing my brush on there anytime I feel it needs it, so there's a little bit of water there. That's probably unnecessary. And then I'm going to just use the ordinary yellow, kind of the mid yellow here, and you can use any yellow you like really, but just to add that little bit of zing to a sap green. It's kind of sunshine through leaves colour, so I'm just going to have some sap green here. I'm going to add some yellow to it, a bit more, there we go, maybe a bit more. There we go. And then that produces this very zingy green. So that has an extra oomph to it. Now there's often a perennial problem with mixing purples particularly. So up here I've labelled this, so if you don't have a magenta, use Elysian crimson, and magenta and ultramarine should make a good purple. So for instance, if you chose, I'll just demonstrate actually, if you chose cadmium red, is it still on the thing, and a cerulean blue together, you get this terrible mud colour. Don't know if you can see, mud. But you want these nice transparent reds and blues. So there's my magenta, and there's my French ultramarine. Let's stick with that. Okay, so French ultramarine over here. So French ultramarine, that lovely, lovely blue. And there we go. And then a bit of magenta. There, and then I'm going to mix those together, and we should get a good purple. There we go, a good purple. And you can vary that obviously by adding more red or adding more blue, but that is the mystery of making purple. And often paint boxes don't even give you an orange, because you can always make a good one. So again, that will be the cadmium red. This red has got a lot of yellow in its pigment, which is why it's making a good orange, and that's why it makes mud with cerulean blue, because that also has yellow in its pigment, which means you've got all three primary colours all knocking around together, and they make mush, which you will find out when we do, oh my yellow's gone mucky, when we do the colour wheel exercise, which is up and coming. And here we are, yellow. Yeah. So I'm actually taking it direct from the pan, but I know there's a lot of wash knocking around there. And then I'm going to mix those together. So I've got my yellow, oops, yellow, 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 and a bit of cadmium red. Whoa, I think I need more yellow, and maybe a bit more yellow still. I'm looking at that, so I've got a decent orange here now, even if it is a bit feeble. But you get this nice transparency with watercolours. So the light goes through the pigment on the paper, and because it's transparent, it's bringing back the glow of the paper, and this is why I think watercolours are so attractive. So I'm just going to show you one of my favourite things, which is Viridian. So I'll take some Viridian. Perhaps I should try this first. Viridian. Over here. And then I'm going to grab a bit of magenta. This is one of my favourite combinations, which I think I came to by accident while doing colour wheel. I'm going to pick up some of this magenta, and then I'm going to mix them together. So this is my Viridian with magenta. Ooh, it makes this absolutely lovely cool grey. You can see it's almost blue, and that is because both those colours have a lot of blue in them. So I'm just seeing if these are dry. They're dry-ish, and I'm going to show you what happens when you overlay washes. There are two ways of painting watercolour, I suppose. You can either crack on and use very dark colours to start with, or that can be very difficult. But what you will find, you'll be laying over colours. So you can paint light to dark with watercolours. So often you will actually use put the light colours on first. This is why watercolour painting is so fiendish, that you have to actually plan your painting. Oh dear, my yellow's got a bit mucky. It's picked up some of the pigment, I think, from the blue. So what happens is often when you're overlaying things, you're disturbing the pigment underneath, and that creates a kind of muddy effect sometimes. So the best thing in watercolours, don't fiddle too much and have a plan. So this is, I'm just going to grab that Viridian because it's one of my favourite things. And you can see what happens when you overlay that onto a magenta. Again, you're getting this nice cool bluish grey. And it's often useful to know how to mix colours on the paper, on your painting. So that's quite a nice way of testing out how colours react to each other. So that blue on top of that yellow will be different again. So I'm going to pick up, yeah, let's do the blue, why not? So I just want to show you. So this is blue on yellow. So that will have a different, slightly different effect. You can see, so it's kind of dulling it down a bit. You can sort of be very purist and only mix your greens from blue and yellow, but you have to know your blues and your yellows before you do that. And then I'm just going to pick up some yellow ochre, so you can see that I can actually make a reasonable green by putting yellow ochre on top of this Viridian, which is now wandering down into the rest of this wash, along with the cat there. So we'll see what they look like when they're dry, but you can see there's quite a different effect of putting yellow on blue or blue on yellow. So the only way to find out is just give yourself that permission to play. And I'm just going to go through some techniques of that are very useful in watercolours, just in these little circles down here. So if I pick up some clean water, so to paint a reasonable wash, what you want to have is a good puddle of colour. I have a good puddle of colour here. You really want to mix up more than you think you need, because you're always fighting the fact that water is evaporating on your painting, and you want to be able to just grab that colour really quickly. So the way to make a wash is actually to go around the outside first, and then drag that wash backwards and forwards. And that's a good way of getting a nice smooth wash. One of the best ways of getting a nice smooth wash is actually to wet your paper first. Ooh, that's gone a bit mad. I'm just going to dry that briefly, but I'm going to wet it again. It's going to still be damp and probably wander off. So I'm just wetting this paper first, and I'm going to pick up this colour because it happens to be here. And you can just see that you're getting these nice soft edges. Ooh, look at that. That's a very exciting thing about watercolours, that you never know what it might do. So here we have that light, and it helps the wash go on smoother, and it's a very useful thing for when you're doing skies. Let's choose a different colour. What should we go for? Oh, let's have the deep red, why not? So I'm going to put this wash on, so I'm just going to go round the edge, round the edge, round the edge, round the edge, and then drag it backwards and forwards. And this is a really useful technique. So what you want is a clean dry brush, clean my brush, dry my brush, and you can lift off washes. Can you see? So I can actually take some of that wash away. So you can make different effects by using this. So again, a clean dry brush, I'm getting quite a nice effect there. But you may come back and find the pigment is all invaded, but you just have to be patient with watercolours and see what it wants to do. Another nice way of working is just to throw water at the situation. So this is the phthalo blue, Prussian blue, and again I'm going around the edge first and I'm just bringing that wash backwards and forwards, and then I'm just going to take some clean dry water and I'm going to drop it in. Now I don't know what it's going to do. I'm going to have to leave that alone, and that you'll find the pigment will spread out and do all sorts of wonderful things. Let's hope it's dried a bit before before the video finishes, and then you can do quite a nice thing to get colours to mix together on the paper. So I'm just going to take the cadmium red, which is very punchy and quite dense and opaque, and then I'm going to take a wash, I hope it will be yellow, which needs a bit of cleaning. You can see that yellow is very sensitive, so I'm going to start in the middle and I'm just going to take that round the edge, whoa, and see what happens. I want a bit more yellow in the middle there, and you can get really nice effects like that. And then one of the most important ways of dealing with watercolour is to soften edges. So I'm just going to take some nice, ooh, look at that, a French Ultramarine, lovely. So round the edge, round the edge, round the edge, round the edge, and then bring wash backwards and forwards. And then, again, you take a clean dry brush, and I'm just going to soften that edge. Soften this edge. Whoa, there's a lot of water knocking around there. You can see that you're getting these nice soft edges. So when you find that watercolour is being annoying, I always find, oh look, I'm getting all sorts of weird things happening there. So when you want a soft edge, and you can actually apply this on top of washes you've already done, but just throw water at it really. So I'm just going to add a little bit more pigment. Whoa, there, and I'm going to soften that edge up here. I think there was a little bit too much water going on. Look at that. And I don't know if you can see, we're getting this really nice kind of moonscape happening here, and that one's looking like Mars. So that is a useful exercise if you haven't used watercolour before, but it's also useful just for the noodling around value. I would highly recommend it to anybody, and make sure you have good paper, kitchen towel and 2 pots of water. And the next exercise we're going to do is probably make a colour wheel. Again, if you've done that before, it's quite good to refresh yourself, and just enjoyable to do an exercise just messing around with colour. And it will also inform your colour theory as well, so you start understanding colour theory if you do a colour wheel. Oh look, it's done all sorts of strange things. So I'm just going to grab clean the dry brush because I can't resist, because while watercolour is wet you can do all sorts of things with it. So I can just add some more water there to get rid of this harsh edge. Ooh, look at that, lovely. So join me next time. Well, I'll probably bind these 2 videos together, but so we're going to do a colour wheel, and we're going to do painting a rainbow, although it's a bit late for that now, but that's a very good useful wet and wet exercise. Yeah.